Good morning,
Sir,
everyone.
sir, your audio is a bit far away. Can we kind of?
My audio isn't clear.
It's clear, but it's seeming a bit. It's okay, sir. It's okay.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
So today I'm presenting a case of 54-year-old female who is working as a school teacher residing at Kathlal, Gujarat, and the informant for the history are a patient and her son. She was admitted in February 2020 with chief complaint of fever since last 10 days. I would like to begin my history from January 2019, that is before 1 year, when patient was 53 years old. Prior to this period, she was asymptomatic and without any comorbidities. Thereafter, in Jan 2019, she developed complaint of fever, which was low grade, without any chills and rigor, associated with generalized body ache, and it was relieved by paracetamol. And this fever lasted for 5 to 7 days. Following this, she noted that her urine output has reduced in frequency, which was previously 4 to 5 times per day to 1 to 2 times per day. And over next to 2 days, it reduced in amount, with patient recalling that she used to pass only few drops of urine. At this point, she also noticed that legs, which was initially up to ankles, bilateral symmetrical without any overlying skin discoloration, and over next 2 days this increased up to knees along with abdominal distension, facial puffiness, and simultaneously she had breathlessness on exertion and lying down. At this point she sought medical attention and she was evaluated, and she was informed that her creatinine was 9.2. Her blood pressure was informed to be normal. There was no prior history of nausea, vomiting, loose stools, or decrease in blood pressure. There was no history of nocturia, cola-colored urine. There was no history of lithuria, stone disease, hematuria. There was no history of joint pain, skin rash, weight loss, cough, or hemoptysis. And there was no prior history of any drug intake. She came to our institute for further management thereafter, and she was evaluated here. She was informed that her creatinine was 9, and she was passing protein and blood in urine. Her blood pressure was also here also was informed to be normal. Following this, she was started on maintenance hemodialysis. She was started on hemodialysis through right internal jugular neck catheter, and 2 sessions of hemodialysis were done. Thereafter, she underwent left-sided renal biopsy. Post-biopsy period was uneventful. After biopsy, she was given 3 doses of pulse methylprednisolone, followed by oral steroids, 60 milligram per day, and she was given 1 dose of IV cyclophosphamide, 500 milligram. Thereafter, she was continued on hemodialysis, and another 3 sessions of uneventful hemodialysis were done. Following another 3 sessions of hemodialysis, patient noted that her urine output has improved initially to 500 ml, then to 1 liter, and then to 2 liter over next 4 to 5 days. Her symptoms of edema and dyspnea improved, and there was no fever during the admission time. Her serum creatinine decreased to 5.
Pause for a second. Can you just pause for a second? We need to take a call. In a minute, I will.
Compared to other systemic other causes of renal failure,
like
sir, if there is any immune complex disease such as IgA nephropathy and lupus nephritis, then
chronic kidney diseases.
Yeah, chronic kidney disease in which the hypertension will be prominent. If there are other causes such as thrombotic microangiopathy presenting as a rapidly progressive renal failure, then hypertension will be prominent. Malignant hypertension, then also presenting as rapidly progressive, then hypertension will be prominent.
Yeah. So, along with thrombotic microangiopathy and acute glomerulonephritis kind of syndrome, though it's uncommon in people of this age, post-infections, for example, if you consider,
yes.
That is where hypertension in an acute glomerular disease is commonly present vis-a-vis an RPGN. Now this
Yes.
is important because the differential diagnosis with the differences between an acute glomerulonephritis and an RPGN. You need
Yes.
to, one is this, that the hypertension is less common. Anything else?
Less common. Sorry, sir.
Anything else you can think of? Acute glomerulonephritis versus rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis.
The oliguria will be there in both. Hypertension is less common.
You're not probably right. Oliguria. Anybody else?
Oligurias are both present in both. So
How many RPGs do you really see with an oliguria? Now, this lady is quite a dramatic presentation.
yes, sir.
Probably we didn't talk about the histopathology. It's probably a significantly active disease. Maybe there are crescents as well. So
Yes,
this
sir.
is different. But generally, when we talk about a rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis, oliguria is not as common as acute glomerulonephritis.
Okay.
When
Okay,
we
sir.
talk about acute glomerulonephritis, you should think of a disease like a post-infectious glomerulonephritis in a child, presenting with
Okay.
acute onset of edema, hypertension, oliguria, and hematuria.
Yes, sir.
The classic tetrad of acute glomerulonephritis. So these four things, all the four, hypertension, oliguria, hematuria, and edema,
Edema.
should be less common in RPGN vis-a-vis an acute
Yes.
glomerulonephritis.
Acute glomerular.
Comes to a child, this is probably more important, but identifying RPGN versus acute glomerulonephritis probably becomes important there. So that is about hypertension. In your negative history, did you talk anything about the pulmonary symptoms? You told in the past.
Yes, sir.
Asthmatic.
There was no, sir. In negative history, there was no history of any cough, chest pain, hemoptysis. There was no history of joint pain, skin rash, or weight loss.
Okay. So any upper respiratory tract symptoms?
No, sir. There was
Ongoing for a long time.
no, sir. There was no history of any runny nose or sinusitis or URTI. There was no any nasal deformities or anything.
Yeah, so those probably become very, very important when you're talking about such cases. Also, though she's a little elderly in age for an immune complex glomerulonephritis, you should say significant negative history about lupus kind of things. You talked about them, I suppose, including skin rashes, joint pains, and all those things.
Sir, yes, sir. Joint pains. There was no history of. As I already mentioned in negative history, sir.
Though the gap of the disease versus her age of gestational of pregnancies and what we call sexually active age is quite a lot. When it comes to female, it is better to give a good amount of history regarding her obstetric problems or anything of those sort.
Okay.
She was faced at that time, whether she had
Okay.
any functions and all. Though I mean, in this, yeah.
There was no obstetric significant history.
Okay.
I didn't mention, but I'd asked that there was no any history of any abortions or any obstetric events during the pregnancy.
You talked about Cushingoid phases.
Yes, sir.
A wise thing to directly use that term because history has to be as much as possible in a patient's own language.
Own words. Okay. Okay, sir.
Cushingoid phase would make it look a little odd. Then you talked about steroid tapering looked a little slow in this patient. You told what would you do when, say presuming this case to be vasculitis or any other glomerular disease, for example, including a lupus. By what time would you try to taper the steroids to 5 milligrams?
Sir, after at least 4 weeks of full dose steroids, we will start to taper and at least continue the maintenance dose for 6 to 9 months.
Continue on what dose?
Taper it for 1 milligram per kg. I would like to give for 4 weeks. Then I will reduce it gradually to bring to 5 milligram by 3 months and continue the same for 6 to 9 months.
Exactly. So most people actually tend to be a little slow on steroid tapering, but once you've got a good steroid replacement drug which you have given, you good induction you have given, I think it is wise to taper off at the end of by the end of 3 months. It is wise.
3 months. Yes.
5 milligrams at the end of 3 months. Once you start tapering at the end of 4 weeks. Yeah. You talked about prior asthma, that is good, you wanted to rule out. But generally in Asian populations, we don't really see a significant
Upper is.
non-pulmonary disease, though it is.
Yes, sir.
This
This is rare in Asian population.
BCPA is relatively less common. We'll talk about that as we go on. Yeah, go on to summarize.
To summarize, it is a case of 54-year-old female with rapidly progressive renal failure in January 2019, requiring hemodialysis, underwent uneventful renal biopsy. Post-biopsy, she received steroid and cyclophosphamide, which was followed by improvement in renal function, developed post-steroid diabetes, currently on steroid and azathioprine since last 10 months with stable renal function, and now comes with fever under investigation.
In summary, it looks relatively okay, but it is what I would do is to try to localize the disease.
Possible. I have, sir, put the renal diagnosis as a rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis. First possibility being ANCA-associated vasculitis. Second, anti-GBM. Third, less likely, third and fourth kept IgA and lupus.
Okay. No, when you are summarizing, does it look like a multi-system disease or a system or a disease confined exclusively?
It seems to be renal limited disease. Does not appear to be multi-system.
Yeah, better to overtly mention it when you talk about that in, history, saying that this 54-year-old lady now presented with a disorder limiting to the kidney rather than a multi-system, but she had some vague fever and fatigue
Yes,
symptoms, but there is nothing like an arthritis or skin involvement.
No, there was no joint pain or any skin involvement, sir.
At any time, better to overtly mention it. Now, when it comes to the diagnosis, you put ANCA-associated vasculitis, anti-GBM, and then IgA nephropathy.
Very less likely, but third and fourth possibility, because it is a presentation of RPGNN. IgA can present with crescentic transformation.
Now, why was secondary glomerulonephritis like immune complex mediated disease so low below IgA nephropathy in your diagnosis? Why didn't you consider a immune complex glomerulonephritis?
Sir, first of all, there was with immune complex, there are no systemic manifestation. Also, second is there is no prior any history of comorbidities or any sign symptoms suggesting of previous renal disease or any hypertension. Another thing is the age of the patient. The immune complex, the causes, they usually present at an earlier age as compared to such elderly cases such as lupus.
Okay.
And apart from that,
now with this,
the most likely what ANCA I place is because of the presentation and the age of presentation, the rapidity with which it improved even after dialysis requiring renal failure, which is well known in ANCA disease.
Okay. Anybody else disagree with it or wants to comment differently? Anyone else?
Sir, can it be C3GN?
C3GN. Okay.
Yes.
So what are the other? That's what we are discussing about. Rather than going to a primary glomerulonephritis, I would put the secondary glomerular diseases, including like what is the immune complex glomerulonephritis before C3GN. Immune complex, cryoglobulinemia. Immune complex includes post-infections, actually, post-infections and lupus. And then cryoglobulinemia also, before I talk about primary glomerulonephritis, particularly at this age. And like what you said,
for cryo, there are no features of any peripheral neuropathy, arthralgia, or purpura or skin rash. That may be against the cryoglobulinemia.
Exactly, agreed with you on that. But taking a diagnosis of immune complex should come before a primary glomerulonephritis.
Okay.
Vijay sir, anything else that you would like to add at this stage, sir? Dr. Vijay. Dr. Vijay Verma is also with us. He's consultant nephrologist at
Okay.
Hyderabad.
Okay.
I don't know if he's listening to us. Okay. So tell me your complete diagnosis. One is you put it as an RPRF, RPGN. In that you told the differential diagnosis of anti-associated vasculitis, anti-GBM syndrome, and immune complex. Then primary glomerular diseases like IgA nephropathy need to be
primary IgA nephropathy, and apart from that, post-infectious, but post-infectious GN, but there's no history. She's having fever, but apart from that, there are no other features.
Yeah. The immune
Post-infectious glomerulonephritis can be.
Dr. Vijay, anything else?
I just joined after a gap of 5 minutes. Let us continue with the presentation.
Okay. So, and this is there. Anything else?
That's it. And currently, she's figure under investigation.
Okay. Word examination.
Sir, in examination, her height is 160 centimeter, weight is 56.2 kg, BMI is 21.9 kg per meter square. Temperature was 101 degree Fahrenheit at presentation. Pulse was 108 per minute in the right radial artery with normal force volume tension and normal condition of arterial wall. Blood pressure was 130 by 80 mmHg in the right, 136 by 80 mmHg in the left, without any postural drop, and low limb blood pressure was 140 millimeter Hg. Respiratory rate was 16 per minute. Skin, hair, nail, dentition were normal. There was no edema, pallor icterus. There was no lymphadenopathy. There was no clubbing cyanosis. There was no abdominal stria. Scar on the right neck of the right jugular catheter placement was there. And apart from that, sir, systemic examination was unremarkable. There was no systemic features in respiratory, cardiovascular, abdominal system.
Okay. So, see, when it comes to examination with respect to a kidney, general examination, most of it is probably relevant to only skin and eyes. The other things that you have talked about, thyromegalies, neck scars, abdominal striae, yeah, those general things are must. But particularly if we talk about, it is about skin and eyes.
Yes.
In a patient of an RPGN, so what would you really look into in these areas?
So for skin, there may be purpura or skin rash, which is because of the neutrophil fragmentation and inflammation of the dermal venues. And in the cardiac, there may be myocarditis, more common, transient heart block, and pericarditis, endocarditis can also occur in such patients.
Okay, skin, I would like you to tell a little more detail about. The general examination is only, as I've discussed, these things, scars and all are general things which can be picked up, fistulas, fistula marks,
Okay.
functioning of fistulas, those gross things can be looked at.
Then,
skin, I want you to tell in a little more detail in RPGN. What all do you look at? Do you look at the...
there was dermal nodules, maculopapular rash, any
okay.
nodular, maculopapular, and then a purpuric rash, ulcers.
You look for purpura first. Purpura are flattened things. They are on the surface of the skin, which, yeah, purpura, papules, or any of these ulcerative lesions on the skin are secondary to vasculitis, the neutrophilic infiltration of the dermal vessels, which
dermal veins,
leukocytoclastic vasculitis kind of phenomena. So the purpura, which is confined to a lower limbs, would make you think of?
Sir, IgA vasculitis, Henoch's corneal purpura.
Vasculitis in purpura should be considered in these patients. Then you look for purpura, and like what you said, nodules. Subcutaneous nodules are an important lesion that has to be noted in patients with vasculitis, because that has been described classically in granulomatous polyangiitis as well as
yes, sir.
polyangiitis, but it's not very common finding that we see. We see more of ulcers, purpura, and papular lesions on the skin. Also, anything else in the eyes?
Sir, in eyes there will be like scleritis, uveitis. Mm, apart from that,
Yeah, scleral inflammation is a common syndrome which has been described in this patient. But generally, when you're talking about examination in any kidney disease,
yes, sir.
better to mention about the
eyes
history, right? Better to mention about the negative symptoms also. Like
sir.
can start from something like acanthosis nigricans to everything about dermatological features of diabetes to all those things. Is diabetic also. And CKD, you better mention about the nails in particular.
Nails, yes, sir.
Nails and whether there is any leukonychia. All those things it is important to mention. So skin, nails, and eyes. Do not forget examination. Write about specific level. See, when you talk about these examinations, better to mention about what features suggest a chronic kidney disease. For example, half and half nails, xerosis of the skin, Hagley's disease, or those
leukonychia.
Things. Those things with respect to vasculitis separately, so that the examiner understands that you have looked into both of them separately. And then eyes, there is an extensive discussion on the eyes and chronic kidney disease, including every part, conjunctiva, whether it is inflamed, scleritis, uveal changes, retinal changes, lens changes, anterior lenticonus, posterior lens, posterior corneal dystrophies. All these things you should mention. Fundus examination. When the discussion goes in these areas, they can extensively discuss about eye and kidney. I think are common areas in which residents fall to explain clearly. Okay. So.
Okay, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
yes, sir.
So when you mentioned that there is no hypertension in this particular patient, particularly it is not a typical feature of an RPGN, as you would say, and someone presenting with this severe renal failure. So in general, someone who has an RPGN or suspected RPGN, you take two groups, one with presenting with hypertension, one which does not have hypertension. Whom do you think the disease process is much more severe? And if so, why?
Sir, the patient, those having hypertension will be more severe.
You have possible explanation for that?
Sir,
in fact, I think it is the other way around. Reason being, in patients with these crescentic glomerulonephritis or RPGNs, the more the glomerulus gets compressed and the more it gets obliterated, the renin-angiotensin system, once it is totally knocked off, your RAS-mediated hypertension is not contributing to your hypertension. So in fact, someone who presents with oliguria without an element of volume-dependent hypertension, if their blood pressures are normal, it actually tells us that the disease process inside the kidney is very severe.
Okay, sir.
Okay, just for your when it comes to clinical practice, it gives you a clue that maybe this gentleman has a severe disease. So as long as the glomerulus is surviving, the capillaries, the glomerular tuft is being compressed by the crescent, not till the extent of hypoxia, they will mount a hypertensive episode. But once that thing crosses, what happens is their pressures won't be that high unless volume mediated, this person consumes water and salt, and then volume mediated hypertension contributes to your high blood pressure. The other thing is, you had mentioned you had put IgA nephropathy ahead of MPGN, as Dr. Srikanth had rightly said. See, in this particular patient, IgA should be the last. I personally feel, because IgA presenting without hypertension, and that too with this severe renal failure, the possibility is less likely. And if you take this as an ANCA associated vasculitis or an RPGN causing hypertension, what percentage of pauciimmune glomerulonephritis can have IgA positivity? So what percentage of IgA nephropathy presenting as crescentic can have a ANCA positivity?
Sir, it is 10 to 15% of such patients. It is noted that ANCA can be positive. Usually P-ANCA, because of the non-specific pattern.
Almost up to 40% is known.
Acha, okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Over to you, Dr. Shrikant.
Now, in this case, the strongest clue to the keeping the ANCA-associated vasculitis as a first diagnosis is probably the therapy which was followed in this, the therapeutic regimen which was followed in this patient, including the way she received azathioprine as a preferential drug. We'll talk about the treatment of this disease in a little while, but before we go to that, we'll just have a gross discussion on ANCA-associated vasculitis.
Yes.
Can you tell the Chapel Hill classification, and it may not be confined to British only, but anybody else also?
Yes, sir. Chapel Hill classification has divided the vasculitis on the basis of the size of the vessel involved. It is divided into large vessel vasculitis, medium vessel, and the small vessel vasculitis. In large vessel vasculitis, it is Takayasu and giant cell arteritis. Medium sized vessel polyarteritis nodosa Kawasaki, and small vessel vasculitis is divided into immune complex and post-immune disease. In immune complex, the differentials given are IgA nephropathy, cryoglobulinemic, hypocomplementic anti-C1q vasculitis, and post-streptococcal. And in post-immune vasculitis, it is granulomatous with polyangiitis, e.g. Church-Strauss syndrome, and microscopic polyangiitis or renal limited vasculitis.
Better to use a single terminology. If you're calling Church-Strauss, you should be talking about Wegener's. But now those terms,
EGPA.
So confine yourself to
EGPA, sir. Eosinophilic granulomatosis polyangiitis.
Okay. Any other extension for this? Anybody else can talk about?
Sir, they have added that you have to add the prefix of the antigen specificity, such as PR3 ANCA or MPO ANCA based on ANCA specificity.
Okay. So that is so what is the reason for this? Why do they want this to be included in the diagnosis? What does it overall give you an idea about?
Sir, this has been because what they've seen is that the disease the response of disease to the treatment or the relapse score rather than a clinical phenotype.
No. So having a PR3 or MPO in your diagnosis itself would make you have a gross idea about what is going. Prognostically, it is important, right? So like
yes, sir. PR3, if it is there, it more upper respiratory tract involvement, there will be more relapsing course of the disease.
Yeah. So more than about the place which is involved, it's about the PR3 is likely to be a relapsing disease.
Relapsing.
MPO is likely to be a more severe disease at the onset.
Onset.
Indolent disease which goes on for long time. That's another information which comes in. Any other extension of this 2012 Chapel Hill? Anybody else?
Sir, there are other extended cases with single organ involvement, then having only primary CNS vasculitis, or patient having other systemic diseases like SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, or patient with underlying etiology like drug-induced or HCV-related vasculitis.
Yeah. So, Pritesh, there is a little extension to this. What you told is absolutely right about large, small, and medium vessel vasculitis. There is a vasculitis with specific etiology, like what he's talking about, what Prashant is talking about, and vasculitis with single organ involvement, like kidney involvement or CNS vasculitis alone. So that is another classification, and there is a variable vessel vasculitis as well, where Behçet's and Cogan's are the two groups of disorders which come under variable vessel vasculitis. Though most of these diseases are not in the purview of nephrology, it is important to have a gross idea of the new Chapel Hill classification.
Okay, sir.
So with that, we'll move on now. Nothing much to discuss about clinical features. I think that is too amateur for nephrology discussion. When it comes to testing of these disorders, like when you send an autoimmune profile in these patients with an RPGN syndrome. So what happens to ANCA in patients with this small vessel vasculitis? How many of them have positivity of ANCA? How many of them have positivity in what particular disease?
Sir, the ANCA positivity, sir, sir, it more commonly the MPO ANCA is positive in microscopic polyangiitis. PR3 is more common with granulomatosis with polyangiitis, and in EGPA the incidence of the ANCA antibody is less unless there is glomerulonephritis. If there is no glomerulonephritis, the prevalence of ANCA antibodies is 25. With the glomerulonephritis is 75, and both PR3 and MPO can be there, but MPO is more common.
Yeah, you are absolutely right in that MPO is more common in microscopic polyangiitis, and GPA is not that PR3 is more common. It's the negativity is low, but yeah. Now, when it comes to EGPA, you talked that the chances of having a negative ANCA are more common. What is the disease in which the chances of positive ANCA are very high, including a double positivity of both PR3 and MPO?
Sir, drug-induced vasculitis is one in which both PR and MPO will be high.
Okay. So, what is the difference between, say, P ANCA and myeloperoxidase ANCA? So, why do you use a different terminology for these?
Sir, because the P ANCA suggests a perinuclear staining pattern of the ANCA, and C suggests the cytoplasmic pattern of the staining of the ANCA. That's why the term P and C is used, and this is because of the pattern which is seen in the indirect immunofluorescence by ethanol fixation.
Okay. Vis-a-vis, what about MPO and PR3? How is the test done?
Sir, that is done by ELISA.
ELISA, yeah. So you get a better idea with the ELISA test. There are two advantages of it. One is the
specificity.
Variability will be a little lesser, and the second thing is you get a titer. Whereas in P ANCA and it is just
yeah, it's just positive, negative, and ELISA we get a titer.
You get a titer. So the assessment of disease is important. Now, when it comes to titer, now the question comes whether really you need to know the titers. That means ANCA pathogenic in this disease. So what are the points favoring that, and vis-a-vis what are the points against it?
Sir, regarding the pathogenicity of ANCA? Sir, based on the experimental models have been there for mainly they are for MPO ANCA rather than PR3 ANCA. They have been in the immunodeficient mice who have been immunized with MPO, and from there the antibodies when injected they cause a similar picture. There has been evidence of passive transfer of anti-MPO bodies from mother to child, and following with there was a vasculitis in a 33-week-old premature infant, and the similar rat WKY rat model is there for MPO, in which the human MPO was injected, and they also developed vasculitis.
Yeah, glomerulonephritis and pulmonary hemorrhages as well. Yeah, but this strong.
And apart from that, sir, regarding pathogenicity, in majority of cases, it has been seen that the titer correlates with the disease activity, and prior to relapse, there is rise in the titer. But this has only modest significance because ANCA with certain epitope specificity may even persist during disease remission.
Yeah. And what you said about the correlation of ANCA titers with disease activity is more common only if the renal involvement is there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and also we are all transplanting these patients after 12 months, irrespective of ANCA, right? The disease is,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is not a strong correlation, though. What is
only modest correlation
is also there, but ANCA positivity is not a contraindication for a transplant after 12 months.
Yes, sir, not a contraindication.
Okay. Among these three diseases, can you tell how commonly kidney is involved in this small vessel vasculitis in these three diseases? Polyangiitis, GPA versus EGPA, where the kidney involvement is common. How common?
So most common, sir, it will be in microscopic polyangiitis. Mostly it is renal limited. Then the renal involvement is less common out of three.
Your voice got cut in between. So,
so most common with renal involvement will be with microscopic polyangiitis, then granulomatosis polyangiitis, and then eosinophilic granulomatosis with polyangiitis,
yeah.
which is less likely to have renal manifestation.
Okay. So, an approximate percentage, can you talk about?
Percentage. Sir, percentage, I'm not sure.
The microscopic polyangiitis, the involvement is very, very common, up to 90%.
Okay. Sir.
In GPA, it is somewhere around 80%, whereas in EGPA, it is less common to the extent of it's only 40 to 50%.
Okay, sir.
Okay. And when we talked about ANCA positivity, we forgot one point. Like, if you are given a chance, what would you do first? You do it with ELISA, or would you do it with immunofluorescence?
Sir, we have to do both, because IF is more sensitive as compared to ELISA, and ELISA provides the specificity. So I would like to do both the tests.
So if you are doing it by either test, the chances of missing are around 10%. But if you do both, yeah, like what you said, the chances of missing, the positivity being picked up rightly is up to 95%.
80-90%.
But to me, my personal opinion, given a chance, I would do ELISA first if the patient is financially
okay.
inside. Okay. Okay. Where is the upper respiratory tract involvement more common out of these three disorders?
Sir, granulomatosis with polyangiitis. There is a otitis media, sinusitis, rhinosinusitis, septal perforation, saddle nose deformity, possibility of subglottic stenosis. So these are more common with granulomatosis with polyangiitis.
Don't forget to include these things in your general examination when you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. When it comes to the renal involvement regarding the glomerular involvement in these vasculitis, or generally about the proliferative disorders, before we talk about the immunofluorescence, in a light microscopy, how do you differentiate a crescentic glomerulonephritis of vasculitis vis-a-vis anti-GBM?
Sir, in ANCA vasculitis, the crescent will be of different ages. We can see in the same biopsy fibrous, cellular as well as fibrocellular crescent, while in anti-GBM, there will be monomorphic appearance of the crescent. They will be of all of same age.
Why is that so?
Because of the, sir, rapidity with rapidity with anti-GBM.
Is something like a one-shot disease. When it comes, it progresses, and it is very likely that the patient will improve on its own, or there will be a remission on its own. Whereas yes, ANCA vasculitis is like a chronic
chronic disease, recurrent and relapsing.
Yes, recurrent and relapsing nature. Particularly as we talked about earlier, if the patient is particularly PR3 positive, going on for a long time, the mild disease can be ongoing. Now, how common is it to find crescents in ANCA vasculitis if you do biopsies?
Sir, 50% of patients will have more than 50% of crescent on biopsy, and remaining will have less than 50%.
Okay. So 50% of ANCA vasculitis patients when biopsied are likely to have
crescent.
In which disease is the highest chance of, out of these three? You have talked about the.
Sir, anti-GBM will have the highest possibility and maximum amount of crescents.
How much is that?
Sir, around 90%.
85 to 90% of them will have
yes,
crescentic GN, whereas it is less likely in vasculitis and even less likely in immune complex.
Immune complex, yes, sir.
Yes. Somewhere around 20%, 10% in immune complex. Though the disease may be severe.
Yes, sir.
Because they have a DPGN like picture where it's also a proliferative disease, but it's an endocapillary proliferation vis-a-vis extracapillary proliferation with anti-GBM and ANCA vasculitis. Can you talk a little about crescents? I'm sure you have read well about it, but
yes, sir.
Quickly about what is a crescent and.
Sir, crescent is basically it is extra capillary proliferation of the parietal cells, requiring covering at least 10% circumference of Bowman's capsule, and we require at least 2 or more layers of parietal cells to call it a crescent.
2 or more layers of parietal cells.
Proliferative cells, and it is admixed with fibrinoid changes, fibrin, and there will be fibrin mononuclear cell infiltration.
Yeah. What if the visceral cells proliferate? Do they
Sir, sir, yes, visceral cell also can proliferate to cause a crescent.
What is that called? It's something like a pseudo crescent, because the visceral cells are not expected to proliferate.
Okay, pseudo crescent.
But except in what disease do they proliferate?
Sir, FSGS, HIVE1.
FSGS, particularly
yeah.
HIV-associated disease, is more common.
More not to proliferate.
Before we talk a little more about biopsy, Vijay sir, anything else to add here?
Nothing much. Please proceed.
Okay. So here you know about when it comes to biopsy, they discuss a little about stains. You should have some idea about why we use periodic acid scale and not HME commonly. You should have some idea about the Mason's trichrome, silver stain. Then use of immunofluorescence versus immunohistochemistry in identifying the different antigens over the different from each other. I'm sure you have some gross idea about those things. And quasi-immune is the ANCA-associated vasculitis, the quasi-immune, where you are not likely to find immune complexes. But remember, in ANCA-vasculitis, there can be some immune complex.
Some, non-specific, means IgG-C3 can be there.
Yeah, yes. So what about the complements in ANCA vasculitis? Anything about that? Anything new?
Sir, in 10 to 15% of cases, it has been found that C3 can be low, and there may be elevated levels of urinary and serum C5a. Recently, it has been described that complement also plays a role in this pathogenicity, and it is basically because there is release of properdin from the neutrophils, and this will lead to activation of alternative complement pathway, and subsequently cause injury to the endothelium.
To make it simple, unlike the previous conventional knowledge that there is no complement involvement in this disease, we know now that there is an alternate complement pathway activation, so much so that C5a in urine is actually used as a
marker of the can be used as a marker of relapse of the activity.
Yes, disease activity can be assessed by looking at the C5a in urine. Yeah. It's about complements. Okay.
Can he talk about the double positive disease? Any experience, or have you seen any patients?
Sir, I haven't seen any patient with double positivity.
Combined anti-GBM
and anti-GBM.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any, but I've read little about it. It's more it is usually the ANCA.
Pratish, your voice
is gone. Voice is gone.
Hello.
Your voice is breaking.
Just a minute. Hello.
Yeah, please tell.
Sir, in the evaluation of this dual positivity, the ANCA antibodies usually come first, and they will cause the injury to the glomerular basement membrane, and following with the hidden epitopes will be exposed, and they may lead to secondary development of anti-GBM antibodies. And the course of the patient prognosis is usually poor if they have dual positivity, because immunosuppression and the total burden of immunosuppression will be more. but renal survival is usually better in this patient as compared to anti-GBM disease.
Renal survival is better because the anti-GBM clears the disease, and so they present very acutely.
Yeah.
Unlike
Early presentation.
Yeah, early presentation.
Okay.
Unlike an ANCA where they go subclinical disease damaging the kidney for a long time without being diagnosed or treated. It is in no way a milder disease. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes.
And it becomes one of the indications for plasma exchange in case
Yes, sir.
if there's double positive disease.
Double positive.
So we will move on to the treatment. I think we have reasonably discussed the ANCA, histopathology. Histopathology, I really didn't discuss much about the stains and all, but that I'm sure we'll be doing on your own. Then we discussed about ANCA. We discussed about the clinical features and the things. Okay, now to the treatment.
Yes, sir.
So how do you plan a treatment for patient with ANCA-associated vasculitis? What are the current evidences for or against some therapies which have been practiced for a long time?
Sir, the treatment is usually divided into the induction and the maintenance phase. For the induction, the evidence is strongest for the combination of the steroid and cyclophosphamide. And recently, for induction, rituximab has also been found to be non-inferior as compared to cyclophosphamide. However, MMF recent trial with even MMF can be used as an induction agent in mild to moderate renal impairment in such patients.
Okay. So you're talking about MMF in milder diseases. So what are the problems with MMF?
Sir, in ANCA, it has been specifically found that the relapse rate is particularly higher and time to relapse is also shorter with MMF.
Yeah, MMF is probably an okay drug when you are using in a mild disease. The problem remains that it doesn't really control relapses.
Yes, sir. Even in maintenance phase, it has been found that there has been higher relapse compared to azathioprine.
In any disease, in any particular variant of the disease, or would you consider rituximab definitely over a cyclophosphamide?
Sir, in the recent evidence shows that in PR3 ANCA, the rituximab may be better than cyclophosphamide.
Yeah. Anything else?
So for maintenance therapy, also the recent trials have shown that rituximab has a better as compared to azathioprine for the relapse. And there was in Manritsan trial, the relapse rate was 5% with rituximab as compared to 29%.
Ritesh, go slow here.
Sir, in Manritsan trial, the relapse rate with rituximab was only 5% compared to azathioprine, which was 29% in azathioprine subgroup. So for even relapse, rituximab recently has been considered as a first choice.
No, we are talking about only induction now. So you told us the options of glucocorticoids, which is mandatory in everybody, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
and
sir.
then we are talking about cyclophosphamide versus rituximab, right?
Yes, sir.
We discussed about in which situations probably rituximab is to be considered. In relapsing disease, rituximab is to be considered for.
Yes, sir. This was seen in the RAVE trial that in relapsing disease, rituximab is better as compared to cyclophosphamide.
Now we have come to that about RAVE and rituximab. Can you tell us about those trials and what?
Sir, yes, RAVE trial, it was done with to compare the rituximab versus oral cyclophosphamide. 375 mg per meter square once a week for 4 doses were given, and remission was seen at 6 and 18 months. It was found that it was non-inferior. There was at both 6 and 18 months, and rituximab was better in relapsing ANCA vasculitis. While in rituximab's trial, IV cyclophosphamide was used. Rituximab along with 2 infusion of IV cyclophosphamide, and the comparator arm was 6 to 10 infusions of IV cyclophosphamide followed by azathioprine. And in that also, rituximab was found to be non-inferior as compared to cyclophosphamide.
Yeah, you've told most of it. RAVE is like more of a a milder variant of the disease, whereas rituximab they've used in severe disease. That's why they couldn't take a chance without cyclophosphamide. So these are patients with mean creatinine more than 4, or they are crescentic, or they are dialysis dependent kind of patients. So these patients in rituximab trial actually received a similar. The starting of therapy is not different from the UVAS regimen. Every 2 weeks for 3 doses was what was started. But at the end of 2 weeks, the cyclophosphamide was stopped, and then they continued on rituximab alone. And they, like what you said, they did reasonably well in preventing the
relapse.
not inferior. Okay. Whereas RAVE trial actually compared with oral cyclophosphamide, right?
Yes, sir. Oral cyclophosphamide was used.
But oral cyclophosphamide is long gone with the Cyclops.
Yeah, Cyclops trial. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when it comes to maintenance, you talked about it already before, but
sir, regarding drugs, options are azathioprine, methotrexate, rituximab, cyclophosphamide. The Cyclosporin trial showed that azathioprine has similar relapse rate as compared to cyclophosphamide, used to decrease the cumulative dose of cyclophosphamide. And then there was a improved trial between MMF versus azathioprine, which showed that MMF has more relapse rate as compared to azathioprine. Following this, there was a Mendelssohn trial, which showed rituximab is better in maintaining the remission as compared to azathioprine. And there was a Mendelssohn 2 trial in which the different the rituximab was titrated again. They were given on the basis of CD19 and ANCA titers versus a fixed dose. And it was found that if we target rituximab according to CD19 or ANCA titer, it does reasonably well, and we need to give lesser infusions. And there was another trial of methotrexate versus azathioprine, VEGENT trial. In that, there was no difference initially, but 50% patient relapse after 3 years in the methotrexate arm. And leflunomide and methotrexate were also seen for the maintenance therapy, but there was more relapse with methotrexate and more adverse.
Don't worry too much about methotrexate, Pritish, because that's a drug which is predominantly used in something like an upper respiratory tract environment.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Not a renal disease as such. Okay. Okay, that completes most of the things and most of the trials, including the main exam, like what you talked about. Where rituximab seems to be a much safer drug, other than some odd patient who develops a really bad pulmonary, either an infection or a pulmonary fibrosis or disease. Also, it prevents the relapses much more significantly than other people. Then, any newer drugs or any other new things in the therapy of?
Sir, the oral anti-complement factor 5 avacopan drug has been currently being tested in the patient with ANCA vasculitis. The phase 2 trial was done in with the avacopan alone, along with low dose steroid and standard dose steroid was tested, and it was found that the results were similar. So it was non-inferior as compared to standard dose steroid.
Okay. Anything else? Tocilizumab.
Sir, another trials are ongoing about belimumab. Is a tocilizumab, sir? I haven't heard about it.
Tocilizumab also has been tried in ANCA vasculitis. But,
okay.
The problem with any of these complement regulating drugs is that they are only useful in inducing a rapid remission. Maintenance has taken part by drugs which are more important in the long run.
Okay, sir.
So there are words about the combination of cyclophosphamide and rituximab.
Rituximab, yes, sir.
Combination of both these drugs. Yeah. Is there anything else?
So, if you go into the pathogenesis of ANCA-associated vasculitis,
yes, sir.
Could you please tell a bit of about that so that we can come into the treatment aspect of it?
Sir, in pathogenicity, there are two aspects. One is the presence of ANCA antibodies and presence of prime neutrophils. The origin of the ANCA antibodies exactly is not known, but the possible mechanism has been the decreased clearance of the neutrophil fragments after it releases the neutrophil extracellular trap and possible molecular mimicry. So there is presence of ANCA antibodies, and with that, if there is any
Your
like
voice is
such as
breaking.
so in presence of ANCA antibodies, when there is a presence of pro-inflammatory stimuli which can come from environmental exposure such as hydrocarbon, or it may come from a viral infection, the neutrophil becomes primed and they increase the expression of the nuclear antigens on the surface. Once the antigen comes on the surface, the ANCA antibody binds to it, and there is a full-blown uh, uh, activation of the neutrophil and neutrophil migration. Following this, the neutrophil will release the proteases and reactive oxygen species, which will damage the endothelial cells,
So
as well as it will release the
I understood that you know everything. So the issue right now is there is definitely a trigger which precipitates the
yes,
production of the antigens and the antigens to come onto the surface and thereby mounting an immune response. So for these particular patients, would you want to put them on long-term antibiotic prophylaxis?
Sir, the trimethoprim.
Yeah, is there any evidence for that?
Sir, there is a conflicting evidence. One is that it eliminates the nasal carriage of Staphylococcus aureus, so it can. Some trials have shown benefit, but others have not shown any significant benefit with trimethoprim. So the evidence is not clear cut for antimicrobial prophylaxis.
Shrikant sir, your inputs.
We would give it anyway because again the evidence is more in patients with GPA, granulomatosis polyangiitis, which is a little less common in Asian population, I guess. But anyway, we would give it as part of prophylaxis.
Immunosuppression, yes.
So that remains as a standard drug. Yeah, but discussion a little about these add-on drugs is quite important.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Anything else, Vijay sir?
Nothing, sir. Nothing. Please proceed.
We discussed briefly about treatment, including he talked about all the trials when it comes to cyclophosphamide,
yes,
azathioprine, rituximab, including induction and maintenance phases.
Any other indication wherein you offer plasmapheresis?
Sir, some patient of pulmonary hemorrhage.
Yes.
And sir, but even Paxios trial, it didn't show that even that subset of patient had any benefit.
So earlier, a lot of importance was being given to offering plasmapheresis for these group of patients. Now, I think with the amount of immunosuppression that we give, very definite indications would be anti-GBM with ANCA positive. And refractory cases where the pulmonary hemorrhages are not resolving with your steroid therapy, pulse steroid therapies, in those cases, a trial of plasmapheresis could definitely be given.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Anybody else wants to add anything? Nayan, Prashant?
Sir, actually, I want to ask this rituximab plus cyclophosphamide. Are we trying to use it more often than only cyclophosphamide or rituximab now?
Yeah, really, Pedigo, what does it say now? It doesn't put rituximab anywhere lower than cyclophosphamide. I think the gross understanding that rituximab is more likely to induce a long-term remission is what is important. So in patients who are at risk for relapses, either in the form of a disease like PR3 positive disease or a clinical evidence that the disease is relapsing, rituximab should remain the first choice.
No, sir. I'm asking about the combination of rituximab and cyclophosphamide.
Yeah, in a severe disease with relapses, yes, the combination has to be preferred. Something like a rituximab regimen where they didn't give up with cyclophosphamide. Using cyclophosphamide for 2 or 3 cycles, the US regimen is started and then the rituximab is also continued. But the problem remains the dose of rituximab is quite variable in different trials.
Yes.
Weekly a few trials. If you look at membranous, it's more complex there. But grossly, how much works? Whether we should monitor the CD19 like what Pradesh is saying in that, or these are the things which make the treatment of with the rituximab much more complex.
Sir, one question I had was regarding treatment of ANCA vasculitis in children that is not actually mentioned very well everywhere. So is there any change to what we regularly treat in adults, or in children is there a more preference to rituximab or cyclophosphamide or anything like that?
The reason why it is not mentioned anywhere so commonly is because it's so uncommon in children. It's a vasculitis is a disease.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to treatment, to my mind, cyclophosphamide, the problems with respect to infertility remain, as you are aware of, particularly if it's a female child.
Yes.
Problems with infertility and cumulative doses leading to malignancies. These risks remain a problem. So I would prefer rituximab, but I'm not really aware of any data. Vijay sir, anything else to add on that?
I have no experience as such with children presenting with vasculitis, but I think, as Dr. Srikanth told, rituximab would be an ideal choice, particularly in young age children where infertility would be an issue with cyclophosphamide.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, there is some confusion regarding the frequency of the frequency of the cyclophosphamide induction, whether it is once per week or once in 2 weeks or once in 3 weeks. Sir, what do you usually follow and
Cyclophosphamide.
Yes, sir.
Cyclophosphamide, the US talks about using every 2 weeks for 3 doses and then every 3 weeks.
Every 3 weeks for another 3 doses.
Yeah, it's like lupus, where you use it like a 1 gram monthly dose or titrated as per the TLC. Both the diseases, you need to check a 14-day nadir count of TLC.
Yes, sir.
The doses. But the US classically talks about every 2 weeks for 3 doses and then every 3 weeks thereafter.
When it comes to your examination, you have to give a definite answer. But when it comes to practicality, it all depends on how the patient is doing week on week or month on month. I think that would direct your treatment. In your practice, that is more important than how frequently. A week this way or that way, really this shouldn't matter.
And I think for an exam answer, I think US regimen is the right thing.
Okay. How frequently would you suggest that we do the ANCA titers?
We do not really follow up the ANCA titers in our patients in any way. It's only for a diagnosis. Really follow it.
And do you have a cutoff for transplant? Like above this, I will not do, or
we follow whatever the KDIGO says, that is 12 months of disease remission and then a transplantation. Usually, once the kidney dies out, most of these patients do well, the relapses are lower. So, irrespective of the ANCA titers, at the end of 12 months, we go for transplant. It's not like lupus that ANA is positive or dsDNA positive, you cannot transplant.
Yes.
ANCA has no value once the disease is in remission for 12 months.
Anyone else has any other question?
Yeah, hello. I have a question.
Madam.
Yeah. Yeah, hello, Srikanth, Dr. Rama.
Yeah, madam, please.
Yeah. Actually, I have a case of seronegative vasculitis. So I want to know, is there any latest literature comparing rituximab and cyclophosphamide in seronegative vasculitis?
Not that I am aware of, madam.
Okay.
Plan of therapy remains.
We treat it as the same way as ANCA positive vasculitis, madam. However, the outcomes would be poorer compared to an ANCA positive vasculitis.
Okay. And how frequently do you test for ANCA titers?
Usually, once it is ANCA positive vasculitis, madam, I go clinically. We'll have to see if there's a month-on-month decrease in the proteinuria, and if the proteinuria is in remission and if there is no deterioration of the renal function, I don't think there is any need to test ANCA positivity. Once the induction phase is over, you could test and see if there is a reduction in the value or not.
unlike in lupus, there is nothing which can really predict a disease relapse. Like what
Relapse.
there is
At
some
least C5A.
Okay.
C5As, but ANCA predict a disease relapse. Pritish, anything else to add there?
No,
Thank
sir.
you.
So there are no more questions.
Yes.
Aniket? Should we
Yes,
end?
sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much,
Thank you, sir.
Srikanth sir and Vijay sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Srikanth sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir,
Yeah.
for your time.
Okay, I'll be ending the meeting. Any other discussion will be done in the group. Thanks, sir.